Shalom Aleichem. We spoke in the past about lottery on Shabbat. Since the drawing of the Mega Million is done on Friday night, which is Shabbat, you have a question of Schar Shabbat, getting rewards, making money on Shabbat. This is something that Chachamim restricted because of business on Shabbat, which is asur, because one might come to write. Therefore, we need to explain if there's a heter and what is the heter to play the lottery on Shabbat, when one can win the money on Shabbat Kodesh. That's called Schar Shabbat. We said that there are few leniencies. Today we like to speak a little bit more about some few other things that were mentioned before. First, we mentioned in the past of Chaim Brisk, he says that the Isur is only when one works on Shabbat. Although you work in a permissible way, you do something that's permitted, like babysitting or something else that is permitted to do on Shabbat. But how could you take the gain? Normally, when a person babysits or does some other kind or type of work on Shabbat, he should do something also on the weekday. This way, the money that he receives, we look at it as avla'ah, like it's swallowed. It's accounted only for the weekday, and we ignore the Shabbat, so to speak. Like we say that his gain was only for the weekday. That's called avla'ah, swallowing the money to the weekday salary. But over here, gaining the lottery, you don't have that. So what is the heter? So it says of Chaim Brisk that the Isur is only when a person works for it on Shabbat. But if he comes without working, it is permitted. Therefore, over here, that is the case, that one doesn't need to work in order to get the winning ticket, and it comes just by a person being passive on Shabbat. Such a thing would be permitted. Although we found in the Gemara, in Ktubot, such a thing, that the Gemara in Ktubot says in Daf Samech Daled that if a man, as we explained before, doesn't do the right thing in marriage, or a woman doesn't do the right thing in marriage, so then we add or we deduct from the Ktubah. And over there, Chachamim wanted to add on the Ktubah when a man was not doing the right his role in marriage, and therefore they wanted to add to the Ktubah, but they said that they wouldn't do that on Shabbat. Every weekday would be added on top of some money on top of the Ktubah, but not on Shabbat, because it's michziker Schar Shabbat. It looks like Schar Shabbat. So over here also, it's without work, it's passive. How could one add on the Ktubah, and it's called Schar Shabbat according to the Gemara? Says of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, it's brought down in Shabbat, Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata, that's the Lashon of the Gemara. It's michzi ki Schar Shabbat. It looks like Schar Shabbat, but not really Schar Shabbat. Schar Shabbat is only when a person works, and therefore that's one leniency for the lottery on Shabbat. Second leniency is the fact that there's no relation in any way from the drawing on Shabbat to the Shabbat itself, which means it could have been on any other day of the week. It's not like something that has to do with Shabbat. This is some of the way the poskim learn that since the earning of the lottery ticket could have been done on a weekday. This the Machaneh Chaim brings such a thing down. It's also brought down in Otzar Tshuvot and the Maram Brisk, that whenever something has no link directly to Shabbat, for example, I'll explain that. If a person wants to bring a babysitter so he can go to shul on Shabbat, that has to do with Shabbat. If one wants to be paid for reading the Torah on Shabbat, that has to do with Shabbat, because you read the Torah on Shabbat. You go to shul on Shabbat, although you go also on the weekdays, but you also go on Shabbat, especially if you want to go with your wife, and therefore you need a babysitter for that, or there's a Sheva Brachot that you want to go that's done on Shabbat, or Shabbat Chatan, whatever it is, it's a Shabbat thing. It's not that it happened to be on Shabbat, but the lottery drawing happened to be on Shabbat. It's nothing to do with the day of Shabbat, and therefore such a thing, according to some poskim, would be permitted. Another leniency is the fact that the money that comes from the drawing is considered as hefker, and the Gemara says that the money that comes from hefker is not restricted from the Isur of Shabbat. This is Gemara in Shabbat Kuf Kaf Amud Aleph, and this is how the Ayelet HaShachar brings down halacha lemase at that page. Some say that the earning for the lottery of the ticket, which is done, one wins the lottery ticket, but the fact that he wins the lottery ticket is for buying the lottery ticket. The fact that the drawing happened on Shabbat, that only reveals the numbers, but the fact that that the winning time is really from the time that you bought the actual ticket that was done before Shabbat. Just the reveal of the number was on Shabbat. Such a thing is not considered Schar Shabbat. Schar Shabbat would be only if you do the actual winning on Shabbat. The actual winning means you buying the ticket on Shabbat. That's how the Sefer Ravid HaZahav wants to say. Whatever it is, there's over here a bunch of leniencies on Isur de Rabbanan that one can definitely rely on and would be permitted to buy that ticket on a weekday for the drawing on Shabbat.